Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, it's Italy. Just when you thought Europe's debt problems might have gone quiet, Rome steps into the firing line. But is it Italian politics to blame? Also an African country made rich by diamonds, but what's Botswana going to do now the mines are emptying out? And past the fake Apple stores and copied designs, can China find some real homegrown innovation? But first to Italy, the latest in a parade of European countries to be tarred with what we might call the triple D: debt, default and downgrade. Perhaps the situation's not as acute as it was in the United States with its potential debt default, but there's a lot of investor discontent with Italy, from those who think it's headed the same way as Greece and Portugal and Ireland. In fact, the lack of political leadership in Rome and Brussels and Washington has wiped trillions of dollars off the value of global stock markets. Here's Italy, though, in some detail. It is the Eurozone's third biggest economy, but has the region's second biggest debt at around 120% of GDP. Greece, as a comparison, has about 160%. Put another way, Italian debt stands at $2.6 trillion, more than the total borrowing of Spain, Greece, Ireland and Portugal. And the country's not exactly expanding. The IMF forecasts just 1% growth this year, down from 1.3% in 2010. But you see, Rome has made efforts to bring down its budget deficit. It's trying to hit the EU's 3% target by 2012. Last year it was at 4.6%, which is actually lower than France. And just last month, the government approved measures to reduce the budget deficit by $68 billion by the year 2014. So it's not like Italy's sitting on its hands doing nothing. However, there are economists out there who believe the markets are underestimating the crisis. This is what Ben May from Capital Economics said, quote, "It seems increasingly likely that Italy and/or Spain may eventually restructure their debts with disastrous consequences for the Eurozone economy and financial market." So what he's saying is that we will likely see a default. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to an economist from the Royal Bank of Scotland for his thoughts. Also going to look at what the threat of default did over in the United States recently, the damage to its reputation, both economic and political. But we are starting in Rome. Lawrence Lee was there as Italy was lined up in the economic crosshairs.
A month ago, nobody, either in Rome or anywhere else, would have thought it possible. Yet the Eurozone's third biggest economy is being hunted by the money markets, just like Greece was. Never mind the Italian parliament already having agreed a basket of cuts. Now, Silvio Berlusconi, a man not used to humility, had to try to say everything would be all right.
We do have solid economic fundamentals. Our banks are solvent and they have easily overcome the stress tests carried out in Europe. We have also seen significant signs of economic improvement.
Bankers have offered all kinds of reasons for Italy's purported weakness, from a rocky government to big public debt. None is new. They all conveniently ignore Italy's strong manufacturing base and low levels of personal debt among its citizens. But underlying everything is a sense that the invisible investors have simply decided to raise the stakes, not against Italy, but against the euro.
It's probably the most significant issue we are coping with since the beginning of the European Union. We could say even since Paris 51 or Rome 57, the two basic treaties of the European Union. The bet is on the end of the euro. And this is a bet that we Europeans have to win.
In Luxembourg, Italy's finance minister met the biggest figures in the Eurozone, though all that emerged were meaningless comments about discussions continuing. Once again, the markets have blindsided Europe's politicians.
Either by accident or design, this move by the bond markets against Italy comes at exactly the same time as most of Europe's political leaders are on holiday. And so not only did nobody expect this, no one's in any position to do anything about it. It means the most extraordinary situation that during the next few weeks before the political season starts again in September, the future viability of the Eurozone itself may be determined.
For if Italian bonds already being traded at over 6% rise much higher, then Italy will be in exactly the same place as Greece was. The chance of a bailout for Italy must surely be absolutely nil.
So let's talk through the situation in Italy now with Silvio Peruzzo, an economist at the Royal Bank of Scotland based in London and Italian himself. Silvio, thank you for your time. When you research and you analyse Italy's economic situation, how do you categorise it? For example, in the US recently, the debt issue was really a political one. Is it the same in Italy? Is it more politics than economics?
Well, that's a very interesting question, I think, where there is also a quite substantial divide on the marketplace. My assessment about the political situation in Italy is that that's not currently the reason why there are growing concerns about the sustainability of the country from a market perspective. You know, if you look at Italy going backward, the elements of political instability has always been there. It's not something new that investors are dealing with at this specific juncture of the business cycle or of the European debt crisis. I think it's an element which is connatural to the country, and in my view, I think the situation which we're facing these days is more related to external forces rather than the domestic political dimension, which is clearly characterized by a weak government. But that doesn't come as a surprise. We knew that already, that nothing has changed over the last 2 weeks or 2 months, right, to eventually change the political picture in Italy. That's my assessment at this stage.
So when you say...
as I said before, obviously there is...
Sorry to interrupt you, Silvio. When you say external forces, just to pick up on that phrase you used, you mean the wider Eurozone problems, the perceived issues of contagion, right?
Yes, that's the main issue in my view. But on top of that, I think obviously that there is a consideration which is more related to the macroeconomic backdrop, which at this specific point in time is extremely important. Now, Italy is a very slow-moving economy, which again is nothing new. Investors knew that already. But given that we're getting broad-based indications that the global manufacturing cycle is cooling down, obviously the market has got the tendency to penalize those countries which are already on a very, very weak footing, and clearly Italy is one of those countries in the euro area. They got one of the most substantial recession back in the height of the crisis, and most of the output losses haven't been recouped, which is a scenario completely different from what we've seen in Germany and in some other euro area countries, and that also Spain is sharing to some extent. So the macro backdrop is having some negative implications on the country and also on the way investors look at it from a medium-term perspective. And on top of that, I think there is clearly a feedback loop effect of the mishandling of the periphery crisis at the European level, which is plaguing Italy, which has got a very huge amount of public sector debt. These are the two forces that, in my view, are undermining investors' confidence at the moment.
Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, he can be entertaining in his analysis at the best of times, but in recent speeches he's been saying, oh, you've got it all wrong, the markets have got it all wrong about Italy, actually we're fine. Which to me is very reminiscent of the way the former Portuguese Prime Minister, José Sócrates, was talking not long ago. He said, no, look, we're fine, when in fact things weren't fine.
Exactly. I completely share this assessment with you, and I think, you know, at the country level, politicians are probably living with a very, very strong sense of frustration at this stage, because clearly the market is looking way beyond what the domestic politics can deliver in terms of policy response. As you said before, we went through the narrative of Greece, through the narrative of Ireland, through the narrative of Portugal, where we're seeing budget measures after budget measures having absolutely no implication on what the perception of the crisis is in the marketplace. And Italy, unfortunately, is moving towards this situation. I'm not saying that they will require external support. I think there is still, you know, we're not at the point of no return. But what I'm saying is that clearly Berlusconi and his government have got very little control on what is going to happen. So I don't share his assessment. I think it's extremely important to be forward-looking and to understand that the market condition can deteriorate very sharply. And that brings me to another level of the discussion, which is what Europe needs to do to eventually ring-fence the euro as a whole, because this is not a crisis of Italy or Portugal or whichever other country anymore. This is a crisis of the euro area, which doesn't work under current institutional framework, and that needs to be reformed to a very, very big scale. So we need a very strong political capital at this stage to take some bold decisions, regardless of what we're going to see in terms of budgetary measures at the country-specific level. That's how we see the crisis at this specific juncture.
Let me raise another point about market confidence, and you're probably aware of this, but just so our viewers know, the French bank Société Générale, which announced it was writing down the value of its Greek holdings, almost trying to limit the damage if Greece were to get any worse. Investors didn't like it, absolutely slammed the share price. It dropped by 9%, which to me, and I want your view here, indicated that there's still not a lot of confidence in the banking sector, and that these Euro banks are probably still very badly exposed to all this bad debt.
Absolutely, I completely share this agreement with you. We had just recently, last month, the most recent information related to the European bank stress test. And you know, we got clearly a picture out there in terms of interlinkages between the financial sector and the sovereign in the periphery, which is very, very worrying. And that's why I think, you know, the actions need to arrive quite quickly, because the periphery crisis, which is a sovereign bond crisis predominantly, can quickly spill into other asset classes. We see the banks. We know this is the first channel that the market is going to chase. We've seen how banks have been heavily, especially those which are heavily exposed to the periphery or to the European bond market in general, have been hugely penalized, also in the stock market. So this is a crisis which, I guess, as I said before, can move into other asset classes and eventually also into the currency. So there is a point at which also the euro could be under threat as a currency if we don't do something to stop the contagion, which is now affecting also a country which is like Italy, which is the third largest in the Eurozone. It's a G8 economy, more than 1.5 trillion economy. So clearly they need to do something. The market knows where the exposures are in terms of which banks hold what in periphery paper, and also which other financial institutions, including insurance companies and real money funds. So it's very important to stop the contagion at this stage. And my fear is that policymakers are still too reluctant to embark into the sort of conversation that I would use President Trichet word, the ECB's Trichet, in terms of describing what's required at this stage in terms of fiscal governance. Is something that he calls a quantum leap. And I don't think the politicians in Europe are anywhere near doing that, even though a lot has been done so far, but more is required. I mean, I can list you some of the options that we think would work, but we don't see really the conversation moving quickly towards the sort of solutions that for us will be important to deliver at this stage. So the market will continue to deteriorate in this environment. That's our view.
Silvio, pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Silvio Peruzzo from the Royal Bank of Scotland. And just one more note to underline the consequences here. Currencies are feeling the effects too, and this is where it gets serious, because these are places either far from Europe or places without any major economic issues. Case one, Japan, the yen rising to record highs because people want to move their money. It might be dollars, it might be euros, but they want to put it in a safer place. And so the Japanese have had to intervene and spend 1 trillion yen selling its currency. And then case two, Switzerland in Europe and in pretty sound economic condition, but it's cut its interest rates to almost 0%. The theory being, if interest rates are at zero, why would you want to save your money there? It's kind of a deterrent, if you like, which would hopefully keep the Swiss franc low and unaffected. Now, the latest problems across Europe followed that down-to-the-wire drama in the United States over raising the debt ceiling. They got there in the end, but oh, it was painful, and there were some bad side effects. Remember, Standard & Poor's threatened to downgrade. It wanted to see a $4 billion cut in deficit. What we actually got was half of that, so the downgrade's still possible. Dagong, the Chinese credit rating agency, far more ruthless. It made the cut from A+ to A, which puts the US on the same level as Russia and South Africa. It said the debate on Capitol Hill led to worldwide panic and revealed the negative role of the US political system on the economy. And that's what we want to look at now, how politics almost made a mess of all this. Paddy Culhane looks now at the consequences both for politicians at home and for America's reputation abroad.
Mr. Hogan, aye. Mr. Coburn, no.
With just hours until the U.S. faced the possibility of defaulting on its debts,
the ayes are 74 and the nays are 26.
The Congress gave the president permission to keep spending. The national debt clock in New York will continue to tick up. After the bitter political fight, leaders are trying to put the best spin on things.
In the end, the two sides came together. That's how our system works.
But it doesn't seem to work for the majority of Americans who describe the fight to pollsters as ridiculous, disgusting, stupid, and embarrassing. Foreign leaders have their own words for it.
They are living beyond their means and shifting a part of the weight of their problems to the world economy. To some extent, they are living like parasites off the global economy and their monopoly on the dollar.
What this deal does, if it goes according to plan, is cut about $2.5 trillion in deficit spending over the next 10 years. That doesn't mean that the United States is going to start living within its means. It still plans to spend more than it takes in, just not as much. China calls that, quote, an even bigger danger to the global economy, and others agree.
The developed countries aren't giving any signs that they are solving their problems.
The question of the substance of the debt of the United States is still pending because that has still to be addressed in the medium and the long term.
Thanks very much, everybody.
But it's not likely to be addressed until after the next election, and some analysts warn the U.S. reputation doesn't have that kind of time.
This debt crisis is now reinforced in the minds of many around the world that America's just out of it, and it may make more sense to follow China. China looks stable, it's growing.
Still, some in Congress are trying to paint this as a positive.
Well, I think it's shown to the rest of the world how messy democracy can be, how yet at the same time, as messy as this has been, we did get through this crisis without the ultimate default. We did get through this crisis with people, while they were arguing, you know, no one took to the streets with guns or violence.
The debt fight didn't provoke protests outside of the chambers of the U.S. Congress, and the deal ensures the people won't feel the cuts decided on now for another 2 years. That's after the next election.
And indeed, so much of this story right now is about leadership, which seems to be either lacking, dithering, or in trouble right across the board. That goes for new leaders too. Christine Lagarde, who's recently taken over at the International Monetary Fund, is now being investigated over her alleged role in a controversial French tax case. Jackie Rowland looks at that from Paris.
Only a month into her new job at the IMF, and a cloud is hanging over Christine Lagarde. A court in Paris has ordered an investigation into her role in an arbitration deal in 2008 that awarded more than $400 million to a businessman friend of President Sarkozy. A lawyer for Lagarde said the inquiry would have no impact on her ability to do her job at the IMF.
She said to me, I think it will be very good for public opinion, given everything that has been said and written, including in judicial communication. That way, there won't be even the slightest doubt. We'll get to the bottom of things. So she considered it to be perfectly satisfactory. Her serenity on this question is completely intact.
Lagarde's appointment followed the arrest in New York of the former IMF director, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, on sexual assault charges. He has pleaded not guilty to all the allegations against him, but resigned from his job to concentrate on his defence. On the subject of Lagarde, the IMF released this statement. The executive board, prior to its selection of the new managing director, discussed the case in France. The board is confident that she will be able to effectively carry out her duties as managing director. So, two successive directors of the IMF, both of them French, with legal clouds hanging over them. The IMF and Christine Lagarde are doing their best to downplay the impact of the French inquiry, but it's embarrassing nonetheless. The investigation may take several months and will not necessarily lead to criminal proceedings. And there is no suggestion that Lagarde herself benefited financially from the controversial deal 3 years ago.
And still to come on Counting the Cost, we're in China, where the government's trying to change the images of mass production and cheap knockoffs into one of innovation and creation. Later on, we visit one of China's new technology parks. Now, though, something a world away from debt and politics, diamonds in Botswana. The country is Africa's most prosperous and arguably most peaceful, largely because of a discovery some 40 years ago. They were the world's richest diamond deposits. But now the mines are past their peak and Botswana needs to restructure its economy or risk the consequences. Peter Grester with this report.
Botswana is the diamond of Africa. It is the world's biggest producer. And since they were discovered in 1967, diamonds have helped propel the country from a desert-bound basket case into Africa's most prosperous and stable democracy. So these are the bedrock, if you like, of Botswana's economy. The challenge for the government is to figure out how to turn the wealth generated by these stones into an economy that's capable of surviving beyond the life of the mines. And that's only about 15 years away. Pauline Ramasoka grew up believing in Botswana's diamond-studded future. Not anymore.
They like my food, especially the beach food.
She finished her degree in environmental science a year ago, but about 40% of graduates are unemployed, and she's given up hope of finding a job. Instead, she sells stews and hot dogs to office workers.
The government have wasted my time. I've spent like 4 years at the bear school, to get educated for what? So if I do this, I wake up early knowing that this is for myself, this is my future.
That disappointment worries the government. It employs about 40% of Botswana's workers. The country is dangerously addicted to diamond money, so it's launched an economic diversification program, encouraging businesses to supply what the government now imports. Economists warn that plan will only bring trouble.
If you're encouraging firms to pursue import substitution and see government as their customer, that's the exact opposite of what we need in the long term, which is to become export focused and see the regional and global markets as their customer.
With 15 or 20 years left to mine the stones, Botswana risks a social explosion if it can't reorganise in time. For this country at least, diamonds are not forever.
Finally this week, you may have heard about the now infamous fake Apple stores in China. 5 of them uncovered in one town, which kind of sums up many people's views on China's production: mass and cheap at best, or in this case, piracy and copycats. But Beijing's trying to change those perceptions with the help of investment funds that support indigenous innovation through technology incubators. What's a technology incubator? Have a look at this from Shannon Van Sant in Beijing.
This is Wang Ye. He is founder of Doodle Mobile, a mobile phone game company, and he's using one of his latest products.
Very simple, but it's a realistic 3D pool game.
Doodle Mobile creates 10 games a month. Wang started the company last year, and already his mobile phone games sell to millions of customers around the world.
This is a very young team, and this is a very young company, but it will become the best company.
Doodle Mobile is one of 23 projects at Innovation Works in Beijing, a $150 million fund that backs early-stage technology companies. With office space, an in-house legal team, and some of China's brightest software engineers, Innovation Works plans to transform ideas hatched here into billion-dollar companies. Chris Abdeman is the general manager.
People need to be encouraged to think out of the box, that this is cool, that you can do that, you should do that, and to actually being compensated for doing so.
And these entrepreneurs say the fund provides a haven for creativity and inspiration. Team members' average age is 25.
They are very innovative. Okay, well, they try to, like in our team, every other week we have so-called hack day. Okay, in the hack day, everybody come out with a great idea. It's out-of-box thinking, okay, and whatever we think is fun, okay, and we create that.
Engineers are creating those ideas with government incentives. The fund is located in Zhongguancun, the technology hub of Beijing, and often called the Silicon Valley of China. Rent here is subsidized by the local government. Nearby, Tsinghua University's Technology Park also incubates young tech firms with funding from China's state-run companies.
The main goal is for innovation to transform China's economy. By switching from made in China to created in China, we will spur regional economic growth.
Entrepreneurs like Dongfeng Tan, who invented this touchscreen technology, say it's only a matter of time before China's incubators and its investment in science and engineering result in transformative ideas that can compete in the global marketplace.
From my perspective, the Chinese are like students, and now we are trying our very best to catch up, and we need to take it step by step.
Most innovations in China are small in scale, and many of the entrepreneurs here are simply tweaking products for the Chinese market.
But at this stage of development in China's economy, with the country's rapidly expanding middle class, these small innovations may be all that are needed to win sales.
And that's where we'll leave you for this week, but with a reminder, of course, to check us out online. If you start from the main page at aljazeera.net/English and hit the business tab at the top, you'll link on to the CTC page where you'll find all our episodes in full to catch up on. And then you can hop on Twitter and get in touch at KamalAJE is where you'll find me for updates on the show and your chance to tell us what you would like to see in some future episodes. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.